Tonight we had a wonderful class, so much input from everyone on how to control yourself when you're triggered. We want to be that amazing person with a lot of control, mind over heart, practically speaking.
So we are saying that we're in the days of Sphira, the days of counting from Passover. When we left Egypt, we started a climb, a 49-day climb until receiving the Torah, which happened 3,325 some years ago and is happening again this year. And during these days, as we discussed at length last week, we are working on ourselves. We are improving our character. We are refining ourselves. We are ascending. And I think for many of us, a great challenge in our wonderful character and our beautiful nature is with our spouse. Somehow, I don't know, maybe because we see each other every day. Maybe it's a safer area to be less picture perfect and more just yourself. But I thought it would be a very appropriate topic in these days to work on our character with a person who might be the most important person who gets the brunt of the other stuff of our character, which is our spouse. So I wanted to focus on tools that will make us hopefully better wives. They will also make us better mothers. They will also make us better people. They'll also make us better friends, better siblings, better children, not only a better spouse. Relationships is relationships. Whatever we're doing to improve one area obviously affects all areas of our relationship. Foundational for all relationships. Again, this is not only in marriage. We just happen to be thinking of that as an area that we might really want to work on. Foundational in all relationships is mind over emotion. Anyone here relate to that and understand why that would be very valuable in our relationship with our spouse and, of course, any other relationship we have in our life? A lot of times we just sort of lose it, as we say. We just sort of act impetuously and we do what we're feeling instead of what we would do if we were thinking. So, of course, the concept of mind over emotion is something we have discussed probably many times over the past 10 some years, 11 some years of this class. But the fact that you might have heard the concept 50 times doesn't mean you've necessarily mastered it. And the fact that I've maybe taught the concept 50 or 500 times doesn't mean I've mastered it either. So it's always good to revisit this if we're working on refining ourselves. If we're working on improving in our relationships with people, this is really a key, that our mind can control our emotions. We feel upset, we feel hurt, we feel annoyed, we feel frustrated, we feel tense, we feel stressed, but then we can control that with our mind. So let's just do a simple exercise so everyone can see what this is supposed to look like. Think of a situation, a common situation, maybe a situation that happens in your life, not a situation that maybe you read in a book somewhere. A situation that happens in your life more frequently than less that gets you emotional, whatever it is, whatever situation is in your world that you know this happens every once in a while, maybe more than every once in a while, and I react emotionally. It's what we might call a trigger, an emotional trigger. So think of one, it doesn't have to be the biggest one, just one that you get emotional over. So we want to get into a space of emotion to talk about controlling the emotion. Okay, I thought of one. It doesn't have to be with your spouse. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. So think about that situation and let yourself feel the emotion. Feel the emotion. So what I was thinking of, I don't know if it's exactly an emotion, but it's more like annoyance, just whatever, annoyed. So think about that, whatever yours is, think about the situation that comes up in your life, the situation that happens and triggers you in some way, and let yourself feel that trigger. Let yourself feel the emotion because we want to feel the emotion to work on the emotion. Okay. Now, what we do now that we're feeling that feeling is basically 4 steps that you want to do to work through this emotion. The first idea is put something godly in your brain, meaning mind over heart really means the godliness in the mind has the power to rule the stormy emotions of the heart. For that to work, you got to start with you got to rev this mind up with some godliness. What does it mean, godliness? It could mean a verse you know by heart. It could be a prayer you know by heart. It could be some thought, something you've learned, some piece of Torah, some thought of godliness, and just let your mind think of that thought. like we have been forgetting consistently. We consistently forget to say in the beginning a blessing and the Shema, but many of you hopefully still remember the words, Shema Yisrael, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. That is a verse. That is godliness. That in your mind. The first prayer we say in the morning, maybe some of you know it by heart. Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayim shechsarta bi nishmasi b'chem l'rav u'nosecha. Something you know of God. Put that in your brain to get the godly power of your brain. Step one. Step two, remind yourself that my mind can control what I'm feeling right now. A lot of times when we're feeling intense negative feelings, we don't think the mind has the ability to control those feelings. We feel that the emotions are the power. We're told, it's actually interesting. This only works in the Hebrew, so you'll have to take it on faith. But there are 3 words in Hebrew: king, fool, nothing. They're all spelled from the same letters in different arrangement. In Hebrew, the word for king is melech, for fool is lemach, and for nothing is klum. And those 3 letters that all 3 of those words are comprised of symbolize are the first letter of mind, heart, and liver. Liver symbolizing like body function. The king is, because the letters in order are mind over heart over body. When it's mind, heart, body, you're a melech, you're a king. When it's heart, then mind, then body, you're a lemach, you're a fool. And when it's body, and then heart, and then mind, you're a klum, you're a nothing. So the second thing is to remember that I can control this feeling. I have a choice. I have the choice to control my feeling. The third step is to put a positive thought in your mind. To switch, again, the feeling's in the heart, but we're controlling it by the mind. So we want a very positive thought in your mind to remove the negative emotion in your heart. So if you were annoyed at your sister, first, you're putting some godliness in your mind, like the words of Shema, reminding yourself that your mind is the ruler. You want to be the king, the melech, not the fool, the lemach. Your mind has the ability to rule. You don't have to be a victim of your emotions. And then put a positive thought in your mind like, my sister means well. She just doesn't have the best tools. She doesn't have the best tact. She doesn't have maybe the sensitivity I need at the moment, but I know she means well. I know she loves me. And I just made it up on the spot. Obviously, if you're thinking about a spouse, think of something positive there. If you're thinking about a child, whatever it is, put a healthy, positive thought. This is all from God. This is good for me. This person doesn't mean to be annoying. This person doesn't mean to trigger me. This person means well. This person loves me. I'm just exhausted and allowing myself to get triggered. Whatever it is. And step 4, because again, this is really a godly process, is think about God's kindness to you in general and specifically in the area that you're upset about. Again, if you were upset about something your sister did, you want to remember, well, this is all from God. God takes such good care of me. And God's really blessed me with family. God's really blessed me with family support. God's really blessed me with siblings. Not everyone has siblings. Not everyone has a relationship with their siblings. Not everyone can confidently say their siblings care about them. I'm really so blessed in this area. These thoughts will control and calm down those stormy, negative, triggered emotions. And if it was with a child that was really rude to you, again, God is so good to me, takes such good care of me. And I'm so blessed with this child. And this child is so this wonderful, and this wonderful, and this, all the good. And today was inappropriate, happens. But in general, there's so much good in the relationship. And I'm so grateful I have a relationship and so many people don't. I'm so grateful I have so much. I'm proud of this child. And I'm so grateful this child. The underpinnings of this is 2 points. There's 2 points that really are the foundation of what we're doing. 1, I have a choice. Meaning very often, when we're in an emotional space, we forget that we have a choice. We don't think we have a choice. We think we're just under that storm of emotion. No, I have a choice. I have a choice to control that storm, to coral in that storm, to abate that storm, or to let it rage. I have a choice. The second underpinning of what we're doing is saying it's a bad choice. It's a bad choice to let my emotions control me. I really, really feel it's a bad choice to let my emotions control me. I will be able to gain control of my emotions. If I feel I want to have an emotional breakdown. I deserve it, whatever that means. I want to indulge in it. I want to have a pity party now, like big time. All right. So then you go for it. So again, you have to remember, one, it's a choice. I don't have to be under my emotions. I'm making a choice. And two, it's a bad choice. A bad choice to be letting my emotions rule me. I want to let my emotions rule me. I want to be the master of mine. Okay, so now that we spoke through it, let's try it one more time. You can take the same example you came with before, or you can pick something different. Want to experiment on something else. But think of something that triggers you emotionally. And it happens. Again, something that has to do with a person, something interpersonal, not like you get triggered when it's raining on a Sunday. But something that triggers you emotionally, it's something that person will do or does in your life that triggers you. Think about it, feel the emotion, get the trigger, feel the emotion. And now we want to take control. We want to have something godly in our brain to allow the godliness, the power of God in our brain to control our emotions. Like the words of the verse that some of you know by heart by now, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Anything godly that you could just repeat, anything godly that you know, anything godly you could focus on. If you have a picture in your room of something godly, of a holy Jew or holy books, anything, fill your mind with something godly. Remember, too, I have a choice. My mind can control this feeling. I don't have to be the victim of my feelings. And I want to change that channel in my brain to something positive and healthy. I want to think about something positive, again, perhaps in terms of whatever this trigger was. Oh, someone came into my clean kitchen, cooked for themselves a whole meal and just left all the dishes and walked away like I'm the maid here. Okay, how am I going to change that into a healthy thought? Different thoughts, different whatever's going on in your life. Thank God I have the strength to do this. Thank God I have the health to do this. Thank God I have a kitchen, and thank God I have food, and thank God I have people in my house that make messes and eat. All of those are good. Will be a lot worse otherwise. Thinking of God's kindness to me in general. Anytime recently you felt that God was really taking care of you, that God really was extending to you love. It could be something small. If we're on the watch, I always see, and I always tell everyone to write them down. So your muscles are very strong. Anything recently that happened nice that God did, that you just felt taken care of. And then remember, here too. And in this area of trigger, I want to focus on the good. I want to change around whatever triggered my emotion by thinking positive about this person. See the blessings in this situation. See the blessings. So it was a little hard for me to walk through the steps because I was telling you how to walk through the steps. But did anyone see how this could help them? How they could really work on themselves and not get under their emotions by remembering, again, you might not exactly walk these 4 steps, but the general concept. Anyone see how it could work for them? Uh-oh, no one's saying yes. That's scary. All right. Well, if you don't, Chava, who unmuted herself?
Yes. So I would say that probably first and second step would be difficult for me when I'm in emotional state. But what I tried before, and it works, to start thinking about good examples, right? In that particular relationship, I'm trying to think about recent good examples. And like in general, every day I train myself to notice good. And so I put it in my bank, right? All the good thoughts that I notice. So I appreciate this thing, I appreciate this little thing. And when the moment happens, I go to that bank and try to pull out those things that I recently pulled there, and it helps me to control.
Perfect. A great modification. Perfect. She skipped step 1, she skipped step 2, but basically she's doing 3 and 4 in her way. Exactly. And I love what Chava said. She's wise, being frugal here, knowing you have to put the deposits in for those times of withdrawal. So when you're in a withdrawal space, when you're triggered, when you're upset, when something happens, when there's a big withdrawal in the account, you don't want it to bounce. No, it's not going to bounce. You put in a lot of deposits. a lot of love deposits for the love withdrawal, a lot of noting the good cop deposits for the feeling the bad. And then what she's doing, which is very smart, is she's training her mind to focus on it. Now, Chava said, when I'm upset, that's not going to be a time when I'm going to like be able to recite the Shema in my brain. And it's not going to be a time when I'm going to remember that my brain is king and I don't want to be a fool. I hear it. But the same way, Chava's demanding from herself something that's somebody else would say is equally difficult. When you're upset, to demand from yourself, let's say you're upset with your husband. He forgot whatever. This morning he remembered, yesterday he did this, today he called, he bought me that, he was in the store and actually texted me if I needed anything, like all the little details of life. That also takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of discipline when you're upset to say, I go to that bank. I go to the love bank. I go to the thank you for all the kindnesses bank, and I start focusing on it. I think the reason why Chava's saying she can do it is because she's disciplining herself to do it for a long time. The very act of, which we're going to talk about hopefully today, noting and focusing and celebrating the good, and then noting and focusing and celebrating the good, and then noting and focusing and celebrating the good is a discipline. And the more you discipline your mind in a certain way, the more it naturally goes there, even when you're upset. So honestly, all of these steps is the same discipline. When you discipline yourself that my mind is the master over my emotions, and you just tell yourself that phrase like 100 million times, then you think like that. When you discipline yourself that I need godliness in my mind to combat the evil, to combat the negative, to combat the bitter, to combat the pain, and you keep training yourself to put that godliness in, it happens even when you're upset. But I love what Chava said, and it does take discipline, but it seems very reachable because, hey, Chava's one of us. She's human. She's doing it. So we can surely all do it too. And it's great. It's exactly this idea. Her mind is controlling her emotions. 100% full stars. Anyone else? Any other past or present thoughts on this?
Can I say?
Yeah, Rachel.
What usually works for me is that I understand that it's wrong. I know that anger is like idol worshiping. That has an effect on me. So I think it's not good to be angry. It's like idol worshiping. I shouldn't be doing it. And since I like to think that I want to be a good person, that helps me not to do it.
Great. That's a wonderful godly thought. So you're doing step one. You're putting a very godly and very appropriate to the situation godly thought in the brain. So I'm going to repeat what Rachel said because that's a godly thought. So it's using the power of godliness in the mind, and it's very relevant, especially if your issue is anger, if your issue is hurt or pain or tension or stress, it might not help you. But if you get angry when someone does whatever, this is a wonderful thought. It's straight from the Talmud. Of course, the Tanya develops this at length, but it says in the Talmud that anger is idolatry. And the Talmud is saying this as the fact, and the Tanya explains at length why. But Rachel's saying, I don't need to know all the deep philosophical, mystical concepts. I don't want to be an idol worshiper. I view myself as a good person. If anger is that bad, I'm not going there. So that's a godly thought, and it's really reminding her that she has a choice. There's an element of discipline of, I do not want to allow myself to be that type of person. That's a great line. You might not use it for anger. You might use it for somebody else. You might go into pity parties. Maybe that's your mode of operation. And you're saying, you know what? You could tell yourself, that's what little children do. I don't want to do that. I'm not a child. I'm not having a tantrum. I'm not having a pity party. Ellen, were you going to add something?
Yes, what I want to say, if I'm upset with something, and then next second I'm thinking about that, and I know people who has real problem, and all of a sudden my problem is not a problem anymore. It just like, and another thing is if I'm upset that nobody helps me do this and I'm tired and that, and then I'm thinking, okay, if I'm alone, I would do this exactly the same work myself, not counting on anyone else, and will not be upset. So it's just like in your mind.
Wow. The first thought, I think we can access. The second thought, I think got to be on a pretty high level to think and go for it. Because you're like, but I know, why are they not happening? But the first thought is actually a thought of Torah. It's written in the first writing of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, where he has a thought for every day. And he writes, is actually quoting from his predecessor, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, I believe. I believe the quote is from his predecessor, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. In physical matters, always look at those below you. In spiritual matters, always look at those above you, which means exactly what Ellen's saying. And I do it too, not consciously. It's just sort of like, maybe it's more like when it impinges on me, like when something happens, like I could be feeling, having my own little pity party, whatever, down, upset, stressed, tense situation. And then suddenly I hear what's happening to someone else in my world, or not even in my world. And I'm like, oh, and then like whatever my problems were, suddenly they shrink and the whole balloon deflates and it's totally non-existent. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. So I like how Ellen's using it because she's being proactive with it. When upset, go for it. Just focus. And honestly, it helps if it's in that issue. Meaning if something stressful happened with you and your husband and you start thinking of all the people in the world don't have a husband, whose husband passed away, who never got married, whose husband is sick now and wouldn't have the ability to do any of the things my husband's doing that annoy me. Wow. Total reframing of the situation. Something with your child, people that don't have children, don't have a relationship with their children, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's so many people like that in our world that we probably know. We don't have to make up stories. Unfortunately, we know a lot of people that are suffering in a lot of ways. So Ellen is absolutely right. And again, she's doing this method without knowing the method. She's putting something godly in her brain that is actually a godly thought. And that godliness in the brain completely switches around from the negative thought and emotion to like just gratitude for the good in her life. She also said, I happen to think that's a bit of a high level thought, but maybe sort of along these lines. Listen, if someone made a mess, I'm like, well, listen, I have to clean up the mess anyway. Thank God, at least I'm not alone. There are other people in my life that can make messes and I'll clean anyway. Why should I complain? So again, it's godly thought. It's a positive thought, and it's channeling the energy of the mind over the raging storms of the heart. So again, what the Rebbe meant by that thought that he quoted is, in our physical life, in the things we want and we don't have and we need, look at the other less than you. Passover, when there's so much work, thank God I have a house that needs to be cleaned. Thank God I have lots of food that I can cook and spend hours in the kitchen making food. And thank God my family has so much food to eat. And thank God then I have to clean up from all the mess made by lots of people and family and food. And it'll be far worse if I didn't have family around, if I didn't have a house to clean, if I didn't have food to prepare. Thank you, God, for all the good. So in the things that trigger us in that area, yes. And then when we're aspiring for more of a relationship with God, think of those that are higher than you on the ladder and think, wow, I'd like to be like that. I'd like to pray like so-and-so says she prays in the morning, or study like so-and-so says she studies, or give charity like so-and-so feels so good when she gives charity. So for those spiritual things, for that relationship with God, you can always look at those people that are doing more than you and say, me too. And for those things in your physical world that you feel less than, see that however many people there are that have more, there's probably far, far more people in our world that have less. And it's always very adjusting our vision. So yeah, that's a great thought. And it's very applicable, and you could use it for almost any situation that triggers you. So Chava's was really practical, Rachel's was really practical, Ellen's was really practical, different. Every one of them did something different, but every one of them is doing this technique. Knowing it or not knowing it, you're all doing the technique and it's all working. And I'm glad you're sharing it for the rest of us. Menucha, you have something to add?
I want to add what worked for me recently. as of yesterday, we had some conversation. The other time it would trigger me right away and I could blame my husband. But this time I was very calm and I thought it has happened. So there's no reason for me to become angry now. And if it happened, so God wanted this to happen for some reason. I was calm like never before. I was surprised at myself.
I like that's very deep. That is, again, putting something very godly in your mind, and it really worked. Now, I think Menucha was able to do that because she has been learning these thoughts for 11 years. So she's really integrated that thought. But what she's saying, which is a very godly, powerful thought that we definitely always come back to at some point because it's so foundational to living a sane, healthy life, is whatever happens is from God. So I think what you meant by saying it happened already is, listen, if I had a choice, I wouldn't love my husband to do this, but he did it. It's past. So, whatever it is, it is. And God's a player here as well. God's a player here as well. It was supposed to happen. God's a player. I accept God. This is what you want. Sometimes for myself, I use that, a modification of that also, like if something like unpleasant happens and I'm like, okay, God, I guess you wanted me to get a little bashed. All right. Whatever happened, it's your world. You wanted this to happen. I trust you. I know you love me. I feel very secure in your love. And this was part of your plan. This was part of your best vision. I heard yesterday sharing a story of how she ultimately became observant. It's a very long story, and I'm going to say it in a sentence, just bring out this point. But when she was like in 8th grade, she had a brother who was 3, who they found had a tumor in his brain. And that was a very, huge crisis for her entire, sound like very loving, stable, wonderful family. And she's an 8th grader. She's probably like 14. And she went through a lot of like existential questions then, like why? She trusted God. She knew there was a God. She didn't doubt God. But like, why would God do this? Her brother couldn't possibly have ever done anything wrong. He's an innocent, beautiful 3-year-old. Her parents were wonderful people. She knew God wasn't punishing her parents. So why would this be happening? Anyway, life continued. I'm going to skip the 45-minute talk. And this triggered ultimately her turning to religion and her brother and ultimately her full family. Now, they're all adults. Her 3-year-old brother is like married and 25. Thank God, totally fine. And she says her father says, I don't know, this isn't something we can say, but the people that went through, and her father says, looking back at what happened, that was God's kindness to our family. That really led our family to make very different choices about our life, and very meaningful, deep choices that probably would never have made otherwise. So obviously that's a huge thing, and we're not philosophical about someone else's trauma. I'm only quoting it because she's talking about her own. But I was thinking about that today in terms of something much more mild in my life, and I was like, same thing, same God, same thing. Do I know? Can I understand? No. I mean, if God was so small that my brain could understand him, that would be a pretty small God, right? God's not so small that our brain understands him, but I trust him. I trust him. Same God. Hope it's not going to take 20 some years for me to understand, but same God. So I think what Menucha's saying, again, is this very powerful concept, which you can use for any situation in your life. People make choices. People can also make bad choices. People can make wrong choices. But if a person made a horrible, wrong, bad, not nice, evil, malicious, messed over choice, it still doesn't take God out of the picture. And God is still the one that wanted this to happen to you because he runs the world and it's happening. So that's a wonderful, very broad concept that you could use in any situation. It's putting a lot of godliness in your brain. It's seizing control of your emotions. And it's just this calming message of, this is all from God. This person could have made a very bad choice, but God wants this to happen in my life because it happened. That's what Menucha said. That's the key point. How do I know God wants this to happen? Because it happened. Again, wonderful tool, totally works, great to remember. And like I said with Chavas, which of course also is true for Rachel's and Ellen's, the best way to be able to seamlessly use this during a time when you were triggered is by thinking it many times before. Any of these ideas. Anyway, let's even go for Ellen's, which you could say was so practical. But still, when you're upset, you're going to think, oh, so-and-so has it worse. Thank God I have a husband who's driving me crazy right now. The only way it's natural to think that is to train yourself to think it many other times when you're not upset, when you're not in an emotional space. And then when you're in emotional space, you can naturally think it because already the patterns in your brain are very strong. The roads are very well grooved from having thought it many, many times. So Chava's idea, or Rachel's, or Ellen's, or Menucha's, you could try all four. They're all good. They're all practical. They all work. They're all godly. But think it before. So in that moment of emotion, it's still natural to think it. Anyone else? Any other good ideas?
To be
Ellen?
positive, life is too short.
Yes, what a
We need
pity
to
to
be
waste it.
positive. And, we need so little actually, for our life. So, it's just like, it's an ability to enjoy simple things.
Absolutely. And that I think goes back to what you said before. When you think, even in your own life, of times when you had much less. I know this is upsetting me. Would I ever have imagined that I would be in this situation? Which again could be in a physical, financial way, it could be an emotional way. Would I ever imagine that I would have this marriage and these children and this support system and these friends and these people and this security and peace in my life? And this is upsetting me. How much does a person really need? What do I really need? And do I want to waste my life on being upset? I have a choice. Again, it goes back to the idea of the choice. I could be happy. I could be upset. I could spend the next 30 years being upset. I could always find something to be upset about if I want to. I could spend the rest of my life being happy and positive. It's my choice. It's my choice. Once we really integrate that, it's my choice. Why am I upset? I'm making a choice. Why am I positive and happy when all this is happening? Because I'm making a choice. I prefer to be happy. I prefer to be positive. Like Ellen's thing, God forbid, in relationships, how many of us have lost someone and thought, oh, last time, like let's say a friend, suddenly hear some friend is sick or passed away. And you're like, when was the last time I called her? When did we laugh, have a good time? Unfortunately, it seems to happen a lot lately. COVID, post-COVID, other things. So many people passing away. And I had my aunt suddenly passed away, was in the hospital, and like within a week passed away. Not COVID related, but just super sudden. And I remembered maybe like 2 months before, and I am very close to the aunt, but like 2 months before, we were actually together at an event and we were sitting next to each other and we spoke the entire time. So I had like 3 hours where I was just talking to this aunt that I love very much. I was very close to, and I was like, so grateful for that dinner party that we both were at, where I had that opportunity to spend those hours talking to her. So true. Life is so short. Relationships are so important. We could be positive. We could be upset. It's our choice. All right. Well, does anyone have another one? Because this is just all really good. This was only the first point of the points I was going to say today, but I think these are really, really, really wonderful. Else have anything else practical that they think about that helps them? Because everything so far was really good. Everything was very practical. And I hope we're all going to use whichever resonated, and we're going to help ourselves. Fega.
Just to have a message for everyone. I'm going on Wednesday to hell. If anybody needs, and 770, if anybody wants to send me names, please, I will pray for anyone and everyone, and I will post my phone number in the chat.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's so powerful, and I'm so glad you're doing it. That's so powerful. I'm so glad you're doing that. And that, of course, is, yes, something else we can always remember. There's always a higher force. There's always a higher power. Thank you, Fega. She just posted her phone number in the chat. And we can turn, we're not stuck. We have powers that we can use in life to get beyond our situations. Anyone else? Well, what I wanted to develop, I'm just going to start now, but it really sort of goes back to what Ellen was saying, to what Chava was saying. In Judaism, we have two dimensions. We have like turning from evil, and then we have doing good. The focus on taking away the bad, the focus on adding the light. Which means in practical life, in terms of relationships and in terms of our own development, am I going to look at all my flaws and work on removing them, which is valid? I'm going to add and do more good, more service to God, fulfill his commandments, learn his Torah. I always have both choices in my service of God and in my relationships with people and myself as a person, like Ellen was just saying. Some people naturally see the bad. And if you want to be a positive person with that, you can focus on removing the bad. And some people, as Chava was also saying strongly, add more and more good. They focus on the good, good in the relationship, good in the person. Both are valid. Removing the evil, adding the positive are both valid. They're both ways in Judaism. They're both very strong traditional roads that work. But in our generation, we respond far better to adding the light than focusing on removing the darkness. And if we think of it in a Mashiach way, in terms of the redemption, when Mashiach comes, when the redemption is completely revealed, the bad is gone. So in a sense, what counts more is our good. The bad's going to go away anyway, but what good is there? And also, when you're in a relationship and you notice the bad, and you try to deal with the bad, you try to remove the bad, you try to pull out the bad, sometimes you get stuck in the bad. Our sages say, one who fights with someone who's dirty gets dirty, dirt clean. So when you focus on negativity, you can get very pulled down by it. So it's easier, healthier, more efficient, and for us more effective to focus on good and to adding good. And that's really, of course, true in life and in true relationships and true in relationships with our spouse. I think what I would like to do, which I guess is going to be next week, I have 5 different tools that I wanted to share how to focus on the good and add in the good in a relationship. And since we're not going to start 5 now, when we have like 30 seconds left, we'll just end with this general point. 1, I hope people will take to heart what everyone shared. I think it was so practical. I'm just going to review it briefly so you can decide which you're going to be using. The idea of noticing the good, like I'm talking about, and putting it all in the bank, putting it all in the bank, putting it all in the bank. So when you're in that withdrawal mode, you can focus on what's there and use it to remind yourself to breathe, to calm, and to appreciate and to put things in perspective. The idea of anger is idolatry, and I'm not an idolater. The idea of thinking of those that have less than me, and really, again, it could be in the relationship, it could be in life, it depends what's going on, but like really shrinking your problem, shrinking that trigger by thinking of how good your situation is in contrast to. And realizing again, different things Ellen said along those lines that are all basically the same idea of like, my life is good. I have a lot in life, and what do I already need? And what I need, I have, and let me make a positive, good choice. And remembering whatever happens is exactly what God wants to happen to you. How do you know? Because it happened. The fact that it happened means God wanted this to happen to me. I accept. I trust him. I know there's a plan. I know there's a purpose. I know it's for good. And what I'm adding now, which is really moving on to another thought, all of these were different aspects of this idea of harness your mind to be the master, to be the king over your heart. And a general perspective, which resonates with some of these ideas, I can always be critical. I can always see the bad. I have to be very smart and very clever to see the bad. I can always see bad. But what do I gain by seeing the bad? I could do something that maybe is not as common. I could see the good. I can focus on the good. I can prioritize the good. I can celebrate the good. And the more I do that in any relationship in my life and in any situation in my life, I'm making a choice, like Ellen said before, to be positive, to be happy, to be content, to know I have a good life and be grateful for it. I could go the other road, but what do I gain by allowing myself to be upset when I could instead work on myself to see the good and be happy.